Hey guys, this is National Master Kevin Yang back at it with another video. So this one is against a new chess club member, Neilz770. So always exciting to have new members, always exciting to play interesting games. Let's get to it. And this is a French defense. And in a French defense, d4, d5, there are a lot of moves here. The advanced French e5, c5, c3, knight c6, knight f3, right? Queen b6, bishop d3. This is a line, and another line is knight c3, bishop b4, e5, c5, right? And then there are a lot of moves here, right? There's like, I forgot. It was like queen g4, maybe? I forgot the line here, but I don't know. There's also knight d2, the Tarrasch defense. Black usually plays c5, and something like this happens. Bam, 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 and then castles, knight c6, knight b3. Something like this happens, and it's okay for both sides. But in the game, d4, d5, knight c3, I chose to play a6. And you might be like, what the heck does this move do? And to be honest, it's partially a waiting move to get my opponent out of theory, but it's also prepares the idea of b5. Now, I'm not saying I will play b5, but spoiler alert, I will. But for now, it's more of a waiting move to get my opponent out of the comfort zone. So then knight f3 happens, and now I play knight f6. And now after e5, knight d7, previously there was the move f4. But I don't want to allow that. But here our friend Neilz played bishop to g5, pinning the knight. So I have to do something. I have to get in the middle of the argument and play bishop to e7. Bishop d3, and now I decide to take on e4. I take on e4 because I can use my other knight and bring it out. But after castles, I play b5. And this is a very interesting moment. Because here white has a few possibilities. White has the possibility to play a4. Right? Try to go for the weak pawn chain. Very weak. For example, a4, b4, and here maybe there might be some holes here, right? And the other idea is, what about knight takes, and queen to e2, right? And the idea is that if I castle, bishop takes f6, and now queen to e4. Give me that double attack, right? So I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to let our friend Neilz just damage me like that. But if I play bishop b7, then there's check, takes, queen takes, and now Chakaruski taking the bishop, and things are not looking great there either. So what do I have to do? After queen to e2, I probably have to bring my knight back to d7, try to save myself a little bit. It might look uncomfortable, but I'm doing my best. So, in the game, I luckily didn't run into any of those problems. So after b5, c3, just the calm supporting the pawn structure. We all know that, remember a4, queen e2, those are good ways of probing at the weaknesses, because in your games, you want to be able to recognize what are the strengths of your opponent's game, and where can I, get in the holes and the weaknesses, right? And this was maybe one of those weaknesses that white could go after. But after bishop to b7, it seemed after a trade, I was getting to somewhat equalish position, castles, and at this moment, our friend Neilz770 traded. And I want to reiterate what I think of trading. Now, you should only trade when you see a benefit for yourself, like when you see a follow-up afterwards, right? Let's say you were going to say, oh, my follow-up is knight to e5, just to sort of develop the queen this way. But then I would say, well, what if you just played knight here, right? Without trading. Because in this position, I would say that this bishop is stronger than this knight. And I would say that because it's an open position, right? There are squares ready to be taken by this bishop. The bishop can come here, and although it won't exactly trade, it's going to sit there on a very powerful e5 square, right? And the bishop on g5 is probably powerful as well, right? It's doing its job, and if needed to, it can back up and go to a central square. So it's very powerful right now. But by trading it, it doesn't do white that much good, right? And here I would say that trading is not the best idea. So whenever you trade, you want to be able to justify it. Say, I want to trade because I'm going to get an extra pawn from whatever move. But if you can't justify it, then, well, sorry. It's just probably not a good trade then. But after bishop takes, bishop to e4, now I trade. And I'm going to give a justification. The justification is because after rook takes e4, I get to bring my queen to d5 with a direct threat to the rook, and I'm able to bring out my rooks right afterwards, right? So I have a threat when I come out and trade the bishops. And I'm able to mobilize my pieces, and that's what I want to do. Queen to e2, rook out, and now we come to another critical moment where white plays b3. Now I can understand that, okay, you want to play c4, but more importantly, unfortunately, the b3 move no longer provides support to this pawn chain, right? Previously, it was doing a good job supporting the c3 pawn, but now the c3 pawn is pretty darn weak with the bishop targeting it, right? And now we have some extra pressure on d4. So after rook to d1, pawn takes d4, and if you play pawn takes d4, I play rook to c8. I have some pressure on the queen side. I can bring my rook down, and white's pieces are sort of tied to the defense of this d pawn. So isolated pawns at times are not very good. So in the game, our friend Neilz770 played knight takes d4. And here I went straight for the weakness. Queen to f3, I said, oh, I'm not sure if I like that move, right? I would suggest rook to d3 because I feel like the queen would belong better on e3, right, to support this guy as well, because it's very important to support all of these people. But in the game, queen to f3, rook to c8, I'm now putting a lot more pressure on this guy. Rook to d3, okay, but I'm continuing to break through. Notice that this guy is also the defender of the knight here. So that's why knight to c2, right? You've got to protect your knight, and I'll show you why later, right? So rook takes, and this is probably the continuation I would go by. Although white does have rook c4 here, so I don't know. It's looking somewhat double-edged now, right? After knight c2, I would have to really think about what to do, because white wants to play c4 next move and just avoid everything. So then I'm just like, okay, well, we have to keep going, right? So in the game, b4, our friend Neilz770 said, you know what? I want to get rid of my weak pawn. I'm going to take it. But luckily I have a tactical shot after this. I play queen to c1, rook to d1, and rook takes d4, exclamation point. And the purpose is that if you take my queen, I take your queen, and there's no way to stop checkmate, right? The king is trapped. So, rook d1, rook takes, and our friend Neilz770 submits to the fact that the knight is gone. After queen f4, same thing. Take and back rank, right? Rook to the back rank, and the king is trapped. So, after rook f1, just accepting the fact that I'm going to be down a piece, I'm just putting more pressure. It's all about pressure. Queen f3, I'll put more pressure. I'll check, and here the only move was king to f1, and I would have gone with some checks, but then I would have eventually played the move g6 because I feel like, you got to keep your king safe. You don't want to fall for back rank mate. You don't want to get trapped. So here I could play something like g6, right? Give my king a little bit of a luft. So king e1, but it runs now into bishop to c3 check, queen to c1, queen to d2, and checkmate. So that was hard to spot, but it was a hard game, right? So the opening was all okay. Our friend Neilz770 handled it well. But after b5, I created a lot of weaknesses. So this queen to e2 idea, looking at this weak pawn structure, maybe thinking about a4, maybe thinking about bishop e4. There were quite some opportunities in this position. And white had to realize that white is taking advantage of my sort of undeveloped, weak queen side. But after c3, I was given time, and time is of the essence. And another thing I want to highlight is that don't trade unless you have a reason to. So in the game, I had a reason to. I brought my queen out, bring my rook out. I had a lot of pressure going against the queen side, and I was working it. I had a tactical shot here with rook takes d4, and I was able to convert with my extra piece, but with no doubt that was a really hard game to convert, right? Especially because I was probing at the weaknesses. I was going inch by inch, and that's something to note, right? Time is of the essence. You want to be doing something that improves your position each move, and you want to slow down, right? You don't want to be rushing the game. It's patience. It's chess. You're just grinding your way, or you can attack your way. It's up to you, but it's all about time, having fun, and doing everything you want to do. So thank you, and I'll see you next time.